Jinwoo grabbed a broken piece of metal from the ship's hull and started walking toward the door that led. Outside, Nari watched him with confusion, but she had worked with humans long enough to know they sometimes had strange ideas that actually worked. The three Scolari crew members looked at each other with worry in their big eyes. "You cannot go out there," Captain Vex said, but his voice was getting weaker as the cold made his body slow down. "The storm will kill you in minutes." Jinwoo stopped at the door and looked back at his friends. He could see that their scales were getting lighter and their movements were becoming stiff, like old machines that needed oil. They did not understand what he was planning because they had never learned to survive without their fancy technology. "I'm not going far," he said, "just to that sand hill near our ship. I need to dig. For what?" Crix asked, his 6 arms moving slowly as he tried to stay warm. "What could be under the sand that will help us, Jin?" Wu smiled in a way that showed he knew something they did not. "Sand is not just sand," he said. "It can keep things warm if you know how to use it. My grandfather taught me this when I was young." Thal wrapped her arms around herself and her silver scales looked almost white now. She was a doctor and understood bodies better than the others. The cold was making their blood move slower, and soon they would not be able to think clearly. "This is madness," she said. "We should try to fix the heating system or build a fire inside the ship." Nari stood up and walked over to Jinwoo. She had seen him work on impossible problems before and knew that his mind worked differently than most people. He saw solutions where others saw only problems. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. "Help me dig." Jinwoo said, "We need to make a hole in the sand, but not just any hole. It has to be the right shape and the right depth." The two humans put on their heavy coats and opened the ship's door. The wind hit them like a cold fist and sand flew into their faces, making it hard to see. Jin Woo led the way to a large sand dune that was close to their crashed ship. He chose a spot that was protected from the worst of the wind. "This is the place," he said, and started digging with the piece of broken metal. Nari found another piece of ship hull to use as a digging tool. The sand was hard-packed from the wind, but they worked together to move it. She did not understand the plan yet, but she trusted Jinwoo completely. They had been through dangerous situations before, and he always found a way to save everyone inside the ship. The three aliens watched through a cracked window. Captain Vex tried to stay alert, but the cold was making him very sleepy. His yellow eyes were not as bright as usual, and his tail moved very slowly. "They are going to freeze out there," he said. "What are they trying to accomplish?" Crix used his navigation skills to watch the humans work. He noticed that Jinwoo was not digging randomly, but was making the hole in a specific shape. It was round at the top, but got wider as it went deeper, like an upside-down bowl. "I think the human has a plan," he said, "but I do not understand what it is outside." Jinwoo and Nari dug deeper into the sand dune. The work kept them warm, even though the wind was freezing. Jinwoo explained his idea while they worked, which helped Nari understand what they were building. "And holds heat," he said. "When the sun shines on it all day, it gets warm deep down. Even when the air gets cold, the sand under the surface stays warm." Nari started to see the genius in his plan. They were not just digging a hole, they were making an underground room that would use the sand itself as a heater. The deeper they went, the warmer the sand became. "How deep do we need to go?" she asked. "Deep enough that the cold air cannot reach us." Jinwoo said, "Maybe 3 meters down, then we make it wider so everyone can fit." They worked for 2 hours while the temperature dropped even more. The sun was almost gone now, and the desert was becoming a frozen wasteland, but the deeper they dug, the warmer the sand felt on their hands. Jin Woo also collected things while they dug. He picked up the bodies of small desert animals that had died in the storm and gathered dried plants that the wind had blown around. Nari thought this was strange, but she had learned not to question his methods. "Why are you collecting dead things?" she asked. "Everything has a use," he said. "These will help keep us warm back in the ship." The aliens were getting much worse. Captain Vex could barely stand up, and his green scales had turned a pale gray color. Crix was moving his 6 arms very slowly, and Thal was shaking, even though she tried to hide it. "We need to do something," Commander Vex said, his words coming out slowly. "I do not think we will live through the night in here. Maybe we should go help the humans dig," Thal suggested. "Even if their plan does not work, we will freeze slower if we are moving." Crix looked out the window again and saw that Jinwoo and Nare had made a deep hole in the sand dune. Steam was coming up from the hole, which meant the sand down there was much warmer than the air. I think their plan might actually work, he said. The sand is acting like a natural heater outside. Jinwoo and Nari had dug a room that was big enough for all 5 crew members. It was shaped like an egg, with the narrow part at the top where they climbed down and the wide part at the bottom where they would sit. The walls were smooth and the floor was covered with the warmest sand from the deepest part. Now we make it better, Jinwoo said as he started arranging the dead animals and plants he had collected. He used the dried plants to line parts of the walls because they would help keep the warm air from escaping. The dead animals were placed in specific spots where their bodies would add extra insulation. Jinwoo knew exactly where each thing should go to make the underground room as warm as possible. Nari watched him work and realized that every move had a purpose. He was not just throwing things around randomly, but was building a survival system that used everything the desert had given them. This is amazing, she said. How did you learn to do this? My people have been surviving in hard places for thousands of years, Jinwoo said. We learned to use what nature gives us instead of fighting against it. The underground room was starting to feel warm and comfortable. The sand walls held the heat from deep in the earth, and the dead animals and plants kept the cold air from getting in. It was like being inside a natural heater that would work all nighttime. To get the others, Jinwoo said they need to get down here before they freeze. Nari climbed out of their underground shelter and was shocked by how cold the outside air felt after being in the warm sand room. The difference was incredible. The room Jinwoo had built was not just warmer than outside, it was actually comfortable like a real house. She ran back to the ship where the 3 aliens were barely able to move. Captain Vex was sitting on the floor with his eyes half closed, and the other 2 were huddled together. For warmth, we have a warm place for you, she said. You need to come with us right now. Thal looked up with hope in her eyes, but she was too cold to move quickly. Can it really keep us warm? She asked. It is warmer than this ship, Nari said. Trust us. Nari and Jinwoo helped the 3 freezing aliens out of the broken ship. Captain Vex could barely walk and had to lean on Jinwoo for support. His green scales had turned almost gray, and his breathing was slow and weak. Crix used 4 of his 6 arms to hold on to Nari, while his other 2 arms hung limp at his sides. Thal was in the worst condition because she was the smallest. Her silver scales looked like ice, and she could not stop shaking. Jinwoo picked her up and carried her because she was too weak to walk. The cold had made her body almost completely shut down. The sand room is just over here, Nari said as they slowly moved toward the dune where they had been digging. When they reached the hole Jinwoo had made, Captain Vex looked down into it with confusion. He expected to see just a cold hole in the ground, but warm air was rising up from the opening like breath on a winter day. How is this possible? He asked in a whisper, because talking loudly was too hard for him. Jinwoo helped him climb down into the underground room. The moment Captain Vex's feet touched the warm sand floor, his eyes opened wider with surprise. The temperature difference was amazing. It felt like stepping from a freezer into a warm house. This is incredible, he said, and for the first time in hours his voice sounded strong. Nari helped Crix climb down next, and his reaction was even stronger. All 6 of his arms started moving normally again as the warmth brought his body back to life. He touched the sand walls and felt how they radiated heat like a gentle heater. The sand is actually warm, he said. How did you know this would work? Humans have been doing this for thousands of years, Jinwoo said as he carefully lowered Thal into the warm space. She was so cold that she could not even speak, but when the warm sand touched her body, she made a soft sound of relief. But Jinwoo was not finished building their shelter. This was just the beginning. He had made the basic room, but now he needed to make it perfect for keeping them alive through the long cold night. He climbed back outside and started bringing down more materials from the crashed ship. He took pieces of cloth from the damaged seats and broken panels from the walls. He also gathered more dead animals and dried plants from around the crash site. Watch what I do, said to the others as he started working inside the sand room. Jinwoo used the cloth to cover parts of the walls where cold air might leak, and he knew exactly where these spots were because he understood how air moved through underground spaces. The cloth acted like a seal to keep all the warm air trapped inside their shelter. Then he arranged the dead animals in a very specific pattern. The larger Ones went near the walls where they could stop cold air from seeping through the sand. The smaller ones were placed where people would sit so they could provide extra warmth like natural heating pads, but the most clever part was what he did with the dried plants. Jin Woo showed Nari how to weave them together to make a kind of ceiling over part of their room. This plant roof would trap the warmest air at the top and keep it from escaping. Nari watched him work and realized that this was not just survival, this was engineering. Jin Woo was building a complete environmental control system using nothing but natural materials and junk from their ship. You are making air pockets, she said as she understood his plan. The warm air gets trapped in the right places. Exactly, Jin Woo said. Each part of this room has a job. The sand walls collect heat from deep in the earth. The dead animals stop cold air from getting in. The plant ceiling keeps warm air from floating away. Captain Vex sat in the warmest part of the room and felt his strength returning. His scales were slowly changing back to their normal green color, and he could think clearly again. He watched Jin Woo work with growing amazement. Your people built things like this without any technology, he asked. My grandfather lived through a war when all the cities were destroyed, Jin Woo said. He had to keep his family alive in the mountains during winter with no electricity, no heat, no machines. He taught me that nature provides everything you need if you know how to use it. Crix was fascinated by the engineering. He used one of his arms to feel how the air moved through the room and discovered that Jin Woo had created a circulation system. The warm air from the sand moved in a gentle circle that kept the temperature even throughout the space. This is more efficient than our ship heating system, he said. How did you calculate the airflow patterns? I did not calculate anything, Jin Woo said. I just know how warm air wants to move. My people learned this by trying and failing for thousands of years. Thal was feeling much better now that her body was warm. Her scales had returned to their normal silver color, and she could speak normally again. She examined the construction with a doctor's eye for detail. Every piece serves multiple purposes, she observed. The dead animals provide insulation, but they also create air barriers. The plants filter dust from the air while trapping heat. Nari was working on her own addition to the shelter. She had taken some of the broken electronics from the ship and was trying to build a small heating device. It was not much, but even a little extra heat would make their shelter even more comfortable. I can run power to this from the ship's emergency battery, she said. It will not last long, but it might help. Jin Woo showed her exactly where to place the small heater so it would work with the natural air circulation he had created. The electronic heat would mix with the earth heat and the body heat to create a perfect temperature. By midnight, their underground shelter was complete. It was warm, comfortable, and would keep them safe through the coldest part of the night. The room felt cozy, like a real home, even though it was made from sand-dead animals and ship parts. Captain Vex looked around at what the humans had built in just a few hours. His people would have needed complex machines and computer calculations to create something like this, but Jin Woo and Nari had done it with their hands and their knowledge. How long will this keep us warm? He asked. All night, Jin Woo said. The deep sand will not lose its heat until the sun comes up tomorrow. We can work on a rescue signal. The three aliens settled into their spots in the warm shelter. They could not believe they had gone from freezing to death to being completely comfortable. The contrast was so extreme it felt like magic, but Jin Woo knew it was not magic. It was just human survival knowledge passed down through generations. His species had learned to live anywhere, to use any materials, to turn disaster into safety. Outside, the wind howled and the temperature dropped even lower. But inside their sand bunker, the 5 crew members were warm and safe. The impossible shelter worked perfectly and would keep working all through the deadly desert night. This is better than our ship heating system, Thal said as she relaxed in the warmth. How did your species learn to do things like this? We had to. Jin Woo said. Our planet tried to kill us every day. Ice ages, floods, earthquakes, wars. We learned to survive anything or we died. Ree smiled as she watched their alien friends getting comfortable in the human-built shelter. She was proud of her species and proud of Jin Woo for remembering the old knowledge that had saved them. The trading ship Stellar Wind shook like a scared animal as it fell through the thick orange clouds of planet Zarian 7. Jin Woo grabbed the metal rail near his station and felt his stomach drop as the ship spun out of control. The warning lights flashed red and orange all around the bridge, making everything look like it was on fire. Nari fought with the ship controls, her hands moving fast across the pilot. Panel sparks flew from broken screens and the smell of burning metal filled the air. She had been flying ships for 15 years, but she had never felt a ship shake this badly. The sandstorm below them was huge and angry, like a living monster made of wind and dust. Captain Vex stood behind Nari, his green scales catching the emergency lights. He was tall like most Scolari people, with bright yellow eyes that could see in the dark. His long tail moved back and forth, showing he was worried but trying to stay calm for his crew. He spoke in his deep voice that usually made everyone feel safe. "We need to find a place to land now," he said, but his words were hard to hear over the noise of the storm and the breaking. Ship Systems Navigator Crix sat at his station with 6 arms working on different controls at once. His blue scales were darker than the captain, and he had small spikes along his head that moved when he was thinking hard. He looked at his screens and shook his head in a way that meant, "Bad news, sir. All the flat landing areas are too far away," he said. "The storm is pushing us toward the desert region. There are some rock formations, but they are not good for landing." Medic Thal worked on fixing a broken medical scanner near the back of the bridge. She was smaller than the other Scolari, with silver scales that looked almost white under the emergency lights. Her claws were more careful and gentle than the others, because she used them to help hurt people. She looked up from her work with worry in her large eyes. "The medical bay is damaged," she said. "Many of the healing machines are broken. If someone gets hurt in a crash landing, I might not be able to help them much." Jin Wu listened to all of this while checking his engineering station. The numbers on his screen were not good. The main power core was losing energy fast, and 3 of the 4 backup systems were already dead. He was only 25 years old, and this was his first trip on a trading ship, but he had learned about machines since he was a small boy. "The engines are dying," he called out to the others. "We have maybe 10 minutes of power left. After that we fall like a rock." Ree wiped sweat from her face and pushed the ship toward a slightly flat area she could see through the swirling sand. The wind hit them from the side, and the ship turned in a direction she did not want it to go. She fought back with the controls, but the storm was stronger than her. "Everyone hold on to something," she shouted. "This is going to be rough." The ship hit the ground hard, making a sound like thunder. Jin Wu felt his teeth knock together and tasted blood in his mouth. The lights went out for a few seconds, then came back on, but much dimmer than before. He could hear metal breaking and air leaking out through cracks in the walls. "We are down, but not safe," Captain Vex said as he got up from where the crash had thrown him. His left arm was bleeding green blood, but he did not seem to notice. "Check for damage and injuries." Jin Wu looked at his station and saw that most of the ship systems were broken or dying. The life support was working, but not well. The heat was already starting to go away, and outside he could hear the wind throwing sand against the broken hull like tiny rocks. Nari checked her pilot controls and found that almost nothing worked. The landing had broken the main computer and cracked the power lines that ran through the ship. She tried to start the emergency systems, but only half of them turned on. "Flight systems are dead," she reported. "We are not flying anywhere soon. The communication system is broken too, so we cannot call for help right away." Thal moved around the bridge, checking each person for injuries. She found that Captain Vex had a cut on his arm and Crix had hit his head, but everyone could still walk and think clearly. Jin Wu had bitten his tongue, and Nari had a bruise on her shoulder, but they were okay. "No serious injuries," she said, but then she stopped and her scales started to look more pale. "We have a bigger problem. The temperature is dropping fast." Jin Wu looked at the time display on his broken station and realized something that made his stomach feel cold. It was late afternoon on this planet, and night was coming in the desert. The temperature could change from very hot to very cold when the sun went down. "How cold does it get here at night?" he asked, even though he was afraid of the ants. Workrix checked his navigation information, and his face showed worry. "Very cold," he said. "Maybe -20. Or 30 degrees. The desert has no clouds to keep heat in when the sun goes away." Captain Vex felt the air getting colder already, and his movements became a little slower. Cold was very bad for Scolari people because their bodies could not make heat like humans could. When it got too cold, they became weak and sleepy and could die if they did not get warm. "The heating system is broken," Thal said after checking the environmental controls. "We have emergency heat blankets, but they will not last all night in this cold. Jin Woo watched his alien friends and saw that they were already starting to move slower than before. Their scales were becoming lighter in color, which he had learned meant they were getting cold. Captain Vex tried to hide it, but his hands shook a little when he reached for things outside. The broken ship, the sun was going down behind the sand dunes and the wind was getting stronger. The temperature was dropping fast, like someone was turning down a giant heater. Jinwoo knew that in a few hours this place would be cold enough to kill his friends. "We need to do something," he said. "I think I have an idea, but you might think it sounds crazy." "What kind of idea?" Nari asked. She trusted Jinwoo because she had seen him fix impossible problems before. Jinwoo looked around at all the broken pieces of their ship, and then outside at the sand dunes. He remembered things his grandfather had taught him about surviving in hard places and stories about how people lived in deserts long before there were machines to help them. "We cannot fix the ship tonight, and we cannot make it warm enough in here," he said. "But maybe we do not need to stay in the ship." The Scaleri looked at him like he was talking nonsense. Outside was a freezing desert with winds strong enough to knock down a person. How could that be better than staying inside their damaged ship? Captain Vex moved slower now as the cold affected him more. "You want us to go outside in the storm?" he asked. "Not exactly," Jin Woo said as he started gathering tools and materials from around the bridge. "I want to go into the ground." The next morning, Captain Vex woke up feeling completely healthy and strong. His green scales were bright and shiny, and his yellow eyes were clear and alert. He could not believe how comfortable he had been all night in the underground shelter. The sand room had kept them all perfectly warm, while outside the desert had been cold enough to kill them. Jin Woo was already awake and adding some finishing touches to their shelter. He had found more materials from the ship during the early morning hours and was making their underground home even better. "Good morning, Captain," he said. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in weeks." Captain Vex replied, "I cannot believe this place stayed warm all night. How is that possible?" Jin Woo showed him how the shelter worked in the daylight. Now that the sun was up, the captain could see every detail of the amazing construction. The walls were perfectly smooth and angled to trap heat. The dead animals were placed exactly where they would do the most good. The plant ceiling created air pockets that held warm air like invisible blankets. "Your ancestors were incredible engineers," Captain Vex said. "They built this system without any computers or measuring tools." Ri woke up next and stretched her arms above her head. She felt rested and comfortable, like she had slept in a luxury hotel instead of a hole in the ground. The human-built shelter was not just functional, it was actually pleasant to be. "I need to learn how to do this," she said. "What if we crash on another cold planet someday?" Crix woke up and immediately started examining the shelter walls with all 6 of his arms. He was amazed by the precision of the construction. Every surface, every angle, every material placement had been chosen for maximum efficiency. "This is more advanced than our environmental systems," he said. "Our machines use energy to fight against the cold. But this shelter works with the natural heat of the planet." Thal woke up last because she had been the most damaged by the cold. She felt completely recovered now and was fascinated by the medical aspects of the shelter design. The air quality was perfect, the temperature was ideal for healing, and even the humidity was just right. "My medical training never taught me that dead animals could be used for climate control," she said. "This knowledge could save lives on many planets." Jin Woo smiled at his alien friends. He was happy that they understood the value of human survival skills, but he also knew that their appreciation came from nearly dying the night before. Sometimes people had to experience real danger before they could see the wisdom in simple solutions. "My grandfather always said that fancy technology is wonderful until it breaks," he said. "Then you need old knowledge to stay alive." As the day went on, Jin Woo continued to improve their shelter. He created a small storage area for their supplies and even built a simple waste disposal system that would keep their living space clean. The underground room was becoming a complete survival habitat. Ri worked on salvaging more materials from the crashed ship. She found some emergency food supplies and a water purification device that still worked. She also located a working communication device, but its range was too short to call for help from their current location. "We might be here for several days," she said. "The rescue signal will take time to reach anyone." Captain Vex was not worried anymore. The night before he had thought they would all die from the cold, but now he felt completely safe in the human-built shelter. He realized that Jinwoo and Nari had not just saved their lives. They had created a comfortable home that could keep them alive for weeks if necessary. This shelter is better than some of the emergency stations on our trade routes, he said. How did humans develop such advanced survival techniques? We had to learn or die. Nari explained. Our planet had ice ages that lasted thousands of years. Humans who could not adapt to extreme conditions did not survive to have children, so over time our species got better and better at surviving. Anywhere Crix was particularly interested in the engineering principles Jinwoo had used. He spent hours studying how the shelter managed airflow, heat distribution, and structural stability. Everything worked together like a perfect machine, but it was built entirely from natural materials. Your species must be excellent engineers, he said, to design systems like this without computers. We are not engineers, Jinwoo said. We are survivors. There is a difference. Engineers try to control nature, but survivors learn to work with it. Thal examined the medical benefits of the shelter design. The temperature was perfect for healing, the air was clean and fresh, and the environment was calm and quiet. She realized that many of her medical machines could not create conditions this good for recovery. Patients would heal faster in a place like this, she said. Your shelter is not just keeping us alive, it is making us healthier. As evening approached, the aliens began to worry about the second night. They remembered how terrible the cold had been and wondered if the shelter would work just as well again. Jinwoo assured them that it would, but he also made some improvements based on what he had learned from the first night. He rearranged some of the insulation materials and adjusted the air circulation system. The shelter was already nearly perfect, but Jinwoo wanted to make it even better. He also gathered more dead plants and animals to replace any materials that might have lost their effectiveness. The sun went down and the temperature dropped again, but this time none of the aliens were afraid. They settled into their spots in the warm underground room and felt completely safe and comfortable. Captain Vex looked around at his crew and realized that they owed their lives to human knowledge that was thousands of years old. Jinwoo had not used any advanced technology or complex calculations. He had simply remembered what his grandfather had taught him and applied it to their situation. Your people are remarkable, he said. You turned our disaster into comfort using nothing but sand and dead animals. Jin Woo was arranging some new materials he had collected during the day. He seemed completely relaxed and confident, like building survival shelters was something he did every day. This is not remarkable for humans, he said. Every human child learns basic survival skills because our planet taught us that technology can fail, but knowledge lasts forever. Ri was working on the small heating device she had built the day before. She had made some improvements and now it worked even better with Jin Woo's natural air circulation system. Tomorrow, we should try to reach higher ground, she said. We might be able to get a communication signal from one of those rock formations. Thal was taking notes about the shelter design. She wanted to remember every detail so she could teach other Scolari medics how to use these techniques in emergency situations. Information could be valuable for our entire species, she said. We have always depended on technology for survival, but your methods work when technology fails. Crix was still fascinated by the engineering aspects of the shelter. He had been studying the construction all day and was beginning to understand the principles behind Jinwoo's design. I want to learn how to build these, he said. Could you teach me the basic techniques? Of course, Jinwoo said, but remember that each situation is different. You cannot just copy what I did here. You have to understand why each part works, then adapt it to whatever materials and conditions you have. As the night settled in around them, the 5 crew members felt warm, safe, and surprisingly comfortable in their underground shelter. The deadly desert cold could not touch them in their sand bunker, and they knew they could survive as long as necessary until rescue arrived. The aliens had learned that human survival knowledge was not primitive or backwards, but was actually more reliable than their advanced technology. When the machines failed and the situation became desperate, it was human wisdom that had saved them all. On the 3rd day in the underground shelter, Captain Vex asked Jinwoo to tell him more about human survival knowledge. He had spent 2 nights in perfect comfort while outside the desert tried to kill them, and he wanted to understand how humans had developed such incredible skills. Tell me about your ancestors, he said. How did they learn to do things like this? Jin Wu was working on expanding their shelter to make it even more comfortable. He had found some metal pieces from the ship that could be used to create better air vents. He smiled as he thought about the stories his grandfather had told him. Humans lived through many terrible times, he said. Ice covered most of our planet for thousands of years. The temperature was so cold that nothing could grow and most animals died, but humans survived. How did they survive without technology? Crix asked. He was using two of his arms to help Jin Wu, while his other four arms took notes about the construction techniques. They learned to use everything the cold world gave them, Jin Wu explained. They lived in caves, they made clothes from animal fur, they burned anything that would make fire. They ate whatever they could find, and they never gave up. Naria was sitting near the shelter entrance where she could watch for rescue ships. She had been thinking about human history and how it had shaped their species into natural survivors. My grandmother lived through the resource wars, she said, when all the cities were destroyed and people had to live in the wilderness. She taught me that every material has a use if you are creative enough to find it. Thal was fascinated by the medical aspects of human survival. She had been studying how the shelter affected their health and was amazed by the results. Everyone was not just surviving, but actually getting healthier in the human-built environment. Your ancestors must have understood biology very well, she said. This shelter provides perfect conditions for healing. How did they know about air quality and temperature control without scientific instruments? They learned by trying things and seeing what worked. Jin Wu said if something kept people alive, they remembered it and taught it to their children. If something killed people, they stopped doing it. Human knowledge was built from millions of successes and failures. Captain Vex was beginning to understand that human survival skills were not simple or primitive. They were actually very sophisticated, but in a different way than Scolari technology. His people used machines to control their environment, but humans had learned to work with nature. Your species adapted to every environment on your planet, he said. Deserts, forests, mountains, oceans. How is that possible? Humans spread all over the world very early, Nari said. Each group learned to survive in their local environment. Desert people learned different skills than mountain people or ocean people, but we all shared knowledge when we met, so eventually humans knew how to live anywhere. Crix was particularly interested in the engineering principles. He had been studying the shelter for 3 days and was starting to understand the complex relationships between all the different materials and design elements. This is systems engineering at the highest level, he said. Every component affects every other component, and the whole system adapts to changing conditions. How did your ancestors learn to think in such complex ways? They had to survive, Jin Wu said. Simple thinking gets you killed when the world is trying to destroy you. Humans who could not understand complex relationships between different survival factors did not live long enough to have children. Thal asked Jin Wu to explain more about human medical knowledge. She was curious about how his species had learned to heal injuries and sickness without advanced technology. What did your people do when someone got hurt or sick? She asked. They used plants, Jin Wu said. Many plants can heal different problems. They also learned to set broken bones and clean wounds and help sick people rest in the right conditions. My great-grandmother was a healer who knew hundreds of plant medicines. Nari had been listening to this conversation and realized something important about human development. Their species had not just learned to survive, they had learned to thrive in impossible conditions. Humans did not just live through disasters, she said. They got stronger from them. Every challenge taught us something new. Every problem we solved made us better at solving the next problem. Captain Vex was starting to see humans in a completely different way. He had always thought of them as a primitive species that had accidentally developed space travel, but now he understood that human adaptability was actually a form of advanced intelligence. Your people turned weakness into strength, he said. You had no natural weapons or armor or special abilities, so you learned to use your minds to survive anything. Jin Wu nodded as he adjusted one of the air vents in their shelter. Even this simple action showed the depth of human survival knowledge. He understood exactly how air needed to move to keep them comfortable. Humans are not the strongest or fastest or toughest species, he said, but we are the most stubborn. We refuse to give up, and we always find a way to survive. Crix had been thinking about the differences between human and Scolari approaches to problems his people used technology to overpower challenges, but humans use creativity and adaptation to work around them. Your methods are more reliable than ours, he said. Our machines can break, but your knowledge works in any situation. That is because human knowledge comes from real experience. Jinwoo said, we learned these things while we were actually dying from cold or hunger or disease. Scholarly knowledge comes from laboratories and computer simulations. Thal realized that human survival skills could be valuable. For her entire species, the galaxy was full of dangerous planets and situations where technology might fail. Having backup knowledge that worked without machines could save many lives. Could you teach these techniques to other species? She asked this. Knowledge is too valuable to keep secret. Humans have always shared survival knowledge, Nari said. That is how we got so good at it. When different human groups met, they taught each other everything they knew. We never kept survival secrets because helping others survive made everyone stronger. Captain Vex looked around their comfortable underground shelter and thought about how close they had all come to dying 3 days ago. If Jinwoo and Nari had not been on their ship, the 3 Scalari would have frozen to death in the broken ship. You saved our lives with knowledge that is thousands of years old, he said. That is incredible old. Knowledge is often the best knowledge, Jinwoo said. Modern problems still need ancient solutions. Technology changes, but the basic rules of survival never change. As the 4th night approached, the crew settled into their routine in the warm shelter. They had stopped worrying about rescue because they knew they could survive indefinitely in their underground home. Jinwoo had created a perfect environment that would keep them alive and healthy for weeks. The aliens had gained a new respect for human capabilities. They understood now that what they had thought was primitive behavior was actually sophisticated adaptation. Humans had not failed to develop advanced technology. They had developed something even better, the ability to survive and thrive. Without it, tomorrow we will try again to reach higher ground for communication, Nari said, but I am not worried anymore. We can wait as long as necessary. Captain Vex agreed. He felt completely safe in the human-built shelter, and he knew that Jinwoo and Nari could handle any problem that came up. Their species had been preparing for challenges like this for thousands of years. Your people are the ultimate survivors, he said. The galaxy is lucky to have humans in it. On the 7th day, Nari finally made contact with a rescue ship from her position on a high rock formation. The communication was weak but clear enough to give their location. She climbed back down to the shelter with good news for everyone. Help is coming, she announced. A Scalari rescue ship will be here tomorrow morning, Captain. Vex felt relief, but also something unexpected. He was actually going to miss their underground home. Jinwoo had made it so comfortable and safe that it felt better than many official rest stations he had stayed in during his years of space trading. I almost do not want to leave, he said. This place has become like a real home. Jinwoo was adding some final improvements to the shelter, even though they would be leaving soon. He wanted to make sure everything was perfect in case someone else ever needed to use it. The desert was full of dangers, and this underground room could save other lives in the future. We should leave instructions, he said, so other people can find this place and know how to use it. Crick spent his last day in the shelter documenting everything with his navigation equipment. He measured every angle, recorded the temperature patterns, and made detailed notes about all the materials Jinwoo had used. He wanted to preserve this knowledge for future emergencies. This information needs to be in our emergency databases, he said. Every ship should carry instructions for building shelters like this. Thal was also taking detailed medical notes about how the shelter had affected their health. All 5 crew members were actually healthier now than they had been before the crash. A clean air, perfect temperature, and low-stress environment had been like a healing treatment. Our medical facility should study this design, she said. Patients might recover faster in environments like this than in our standard medical bays. The next morning, they heard the sound of engines in the sky. The rescue ship was a large Scalari vessel with advanced environmental controls and comfortable passenger areas. Captain Vex felt excited to see it, but also sad to leave their underground home. The rescue ship landed near their crash site, and a team of Scalari officers came out to find them. Commander Zeth was leading the rescue mission, and he expected to find desperate survivors barely alive after a week in the harsh desert. Where Are the crash victims? He asked Nari when she met him at the landing site. We are all here and we are fine, she said. Follow me and you will see something amazing. Commander Zeth was confused by Nari's confident attitude. He had seen many crash rescues and survivors were usually weak, hungry, and desperate, but Nari looked healthy and relaxed like she had been on vacation instead of fighting for survival. The rescue team followed Nari to the sand dune where Jinwoo was emerging from the underground shelter. He looked completely normal and comfortable, not at all like someone who had been stranded in a deadly desert. Captain Vex came out next, followed by Crix and Thal. All three Scolari looked healthy and well-rested. Commander Zeth could not believe what he was seeing. These people had survived a week in conditions that should have killed them, and they looked better than most passengers on luxury ships. How is this possible? He asked. Where have you been staying down here? Captain Vex said proudly as he showed the rescue team the entrance to their underground shelter. Commander Zeth looked into the hole and felt warm air rising up from below. He could not understand how a simple hole in the sand could be generating heat. He climbed down into the shelter and his eyes widened with amazement. This is incredible, he said. The temperature is perfect. The air is clean and the space is actually comfortable. How did you build this? Our human crew members made it, Jin Woo said from behind him, using nothing but sand, dead animals, and pieces from our crashed ship. Commander Zeth examined the shelter walls and ceiling. He was an experienced officer who had seen many different types of emergency equipment, but he had never seen anything like this. The construction was sophisticated and efficient, but it used no advanced technology at all. This is better than our standard emergency shelters, he said. How did you know how to build human survival knowledge? Jinwoo explained. My grandfather taught me these techniques when I was young. The rescue team spent 2 hours examining the shelter and asking questions about its construction. They were amazed by every aspect of the design, from the air circulation system to the insulation techniques to the waste disposal area. Commander Zeth realized that he was looking at something that could change how his species approached emergency survival. His people had always depended on technology, but technology could fail. This shelter used principles that would work on any planet in any situation. I need to document this for our emergency protocols. He said this design could save thousands of lives. Jinwoo was happy to explain everything. He showed the rescue team how to choose the right sand, how to arrange insulating materials, and how to create air circulation without any machines. He also explained the principles behind each design choice so they could adapt the techniques to different environments. The most important thing is to work with nature instead of fighting against it, he said. Every planet has materials you can use if you understand how they work. Captain Vex helped with the explanations. He had watched the construction process and understood how each element contributed to the overall system. He was proud to have learned from the humans and wanted to share that knowledge. This shelter saved our lives, he told Commander Zeth. Without it, we would have frozen to death on the first night. But more than that, it kept us comfortable and healthy for an entire week. Commander Zeth was beginning to understand the value of human survival skills. His species had dismissed humans as primitive, but this shelter proved that human knowledge was actually more advanced than Scolari technology in important ways. We need humans on our emergency response teams, he said. Their skills are invaluable. When technology fails, Thal showed the rescue team her medical notes about how the shelter had affected their health. Everyone had slept better, eaten better, and felt better in the underground environment than they usually did on their ship. Human ancestors understood biology better than we realized, she said. They created healing environments without any scientific instruments. As they prepared to leave the desert, Jinwoo took one last look at their underground home. He was proud of what they had built, but more importantly, he was glad that his alien friends now understood the value of human survival knowledge. Crix asked if he could stay and study the shelter longer. He wanted to learn more about the construction techniques and understand all the engineering principles Jinwoo had used. I want to be able to build one of these myself, he said. This knowledge is too important to forget. Commander Zeth agreed to let Crix stay for additional training. He also requested that Jinwoo and re-give classes to Scolari emergency crews when they returned to the space station. Jinwoo would teach other officers how to build survival shelters using natural materials. Your species has something we need, he told the humans. Advanced technology. is wonderful, but basic survival skills are essential. As the rescue ship lifted off from the desert, Commander Z